Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Writing Life. I'm Stephen W. Long, and before today's show, I was thinking that we've done this long enough now that we're starting to get some return guests, and such is the case today, and I'm so pleased to have Colette Tennant with us again. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And you have written, I think most recently, because I know you've written other things as well, just a really kind of a fascinating book, or at least the approach or the topic is fascinating. So, Caroline, it's up there. So, Religion in the Handmaid's Tale.
Right.
And I think that's so popular now on Hulu. But your work, I think, probably is based on the book first. In fact, how long has your book been out?
My book just came out in September of this year,
Okay.
so just last month.
Okay. Now, The Handmaid's Tale has been around how long?
Right, since 1985.
Really? Okay,
Right.
so quite some time.
But it's never fallen out of favor, and it gained popularity with the Trump administration.
You're
So-
prescient. I want to get there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but first, why this book? Why this theme? What brought you to this?
Well, that's a fun story, so thank you for asking me about that. I was actually at a writers' conference the summer of 2018 and studying poetry when I got an email from a publisher I didn't know, and she said she was an acquisitions editor, and she asked me if I'd like to write a book on Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale. Well,
Okay.
I'd already done my doctoral dissertation on Margaret Atwood's first 7 novels and also a book afterwards on that. And so I thought it might be a come-on. It sounded too good to be true.
Right, right.
So I looked up the publisher, and it was a really good publisher. So I emailed her back, and I said, yes, I would like to do that. Am I trying out with a lot of people?
Right.
And she said, no, I'm just asking you. And I said, well, thank you, but why are you asking
Right.
me? She said she snooped me out on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is probably because of your earlier work, which I actually was going to talk to you about. Is that Reading the Gothic in Margaret Atwood's first 7 novels?
Novels, right.
Yeah, that's okay.
So I did that as a doctoral dissertation and then added to it to make it a book.
Oh, boy.
And then, so I think that's probably how she snooped me out on the internet.
Okay. Well, back up a little bit, because I didn't know the why, but I knew the what. And was the first work sort of picked among this whole field of possibilities, and now you're maybe sort of regarded as the Margaret Atwood expert, or are you particularly drawn to her?
I think I am drawn to Margaret Atwood, but I don't know that I would be bold enough to call myself an expert on
Okay.
Margaret Atwood. But I think she was looking for somebody who knew about religion and Margaret Atwood.
Okay.
And that
okay.
was the happy
This-
occurrence that made her.
Synchronicity.
Yeah, the synchronicity that made her ask me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is great because you're just anticipating all my questions.
Oh.
And so, do you have a background in religion, or why this approach?
I do. I'm an English professor at a Christian university in Salem,
Okay.
Oregon called Corbin University. So I think she put 2 and 2 together, and
Okay.
knowing that and the fact that I'd written a couple of things on Atwood.
So sort of a leg up. I mean, you've got to start on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think, I suspect anybody watching is going to already know, but without your work, what's the setup of The Handmaid's Tale? What's the premise, and what goes on in that book?
Okay. The Handmaid's Tale is a dystopian novel set in not too distant future as of 1985. And some people call it a fundamentalist religious group, but I would just say really people who are looking for power, and so they use a veneer of religion in order to get that power. So they take over a segment of the United States. And it's kind of funny because the Handmaid's Tale is set where Harvard University is now,
Okay.
in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So here's this university that's kind of a symbol of free thought and speech,
Right.
and it's totally taken over by this so-called religious group.
Yeah.
That
And I suspect Margaret Atwood, that's not an accident.
no, that's not an
Yeah.
accident.
Yeah, I think.
She does everything really intentionally, I
Yeah.
think. And so, yeah, they take it over, and the environment has been just like almost destroyed, and a lot of the women are infertile, and so these men in power are allowed to get handmaids who are women still fertile. But the problem with that is there were so few fertile women that they just kind of kidnap them. They take their families away. A lot of them already were married with children, and they get stripped of all that and given to a man in power who's literally called a commander. So the main character of Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale is called Offred, which because she gives up her name and
Right.
everything,
And
stripped of
identity,
everything,
really, and-
her whole identity, and she just becomes an object
Yeah.
of a man named Fred. So
Yeah.
she's called of Fred,
Right.
which becomes a pun for offered.
See, I read the book, but I missed that part.
Oh, did you?
I
Okay.
figured out the of Fred part, but yeah.
If you read my book, it'll help you with all
Well,
that.
I want to. I want to. I was reading about, Margaret Atwood has been asked, I guess, two questions sort of routinely, and that is her book feminist, and is it anti-religion?
Right.
And I know what she said, but what do you think?
And she, in the introduction to the Hulu edition, which I have right here, she addresses both of those questions that she said she's been asked so many times. And she said it's a feminist book only in terms of kind of cheering for women and empowering women. She said it's not a feminist book if you want to just totally discount men, and it's not that then.
Yeah.
She said that would be a misreading of the book. And she said in terms of religion, it's not an anti-religious book at all, which I address all the way through my book, of course, because it's called Religion and the Handmaid's Tale. But she said it's not against religion, it's what she's working against in the original Handmaid's Tale is people who use religion only as a veneer, who are hypocrites and really just use it to gain some kind of power over
Sure.
people or manipulate them.
Sure. And this is strictly my take on that broader topic. But I think in the history of the world, that's been done to some degree, time and again,
Oh, yeah.
for power. And boy, it gives religion a bad name.
Oh, it does. It
Yeah.
absolutely does. And I mean, even though these people in the land is called Gilead, which is a very biblical name. I have my first chapter of my book is all on the names of the characters and places.
Okay.
And it's called Gilead, but the people in Gilead aren't religious at all. The only church that we see in the novel has become a museum that nobody goes in anymore.
And this is going to show my ignorance, but what is that reference? In fact, there's a novel called Gilead. And but anyway, what
Right.
what in the Bible? What is
Yeah.
is Gilead a place?
Gilead is a place.
Okay.
And Gilead is a place where Jacob takes Leah and Rachel after he kind of steals them from his father-in-law, his two wives, and he takes them to a land called Gilead.
Okay.
So Gilead in that sense is kind of like the land of stolen daughters.
Very appropriate. Yeah.
And then there's another place in the Bible where I quote, if you don't mind me looking
Not
this
at all.
up for a second. And it's called basically the land of, well, let me find it exactly here. Gilead is a city, and I'm quoting from the book of Hosea in the Bible, chapter 6, verse 8 in the NIV. Gilead is a city of evildoers stained with footprints of blood. And, you know, the handmaids wear that red
Right.
outfit. And the Republic of Gilead is just filled with blood. They kill people, they hang them from the wall, anybody who disagrees with them. They have these awful ceremonies called particutions, where they literally ask the handmaids to kill a man with their bare hands or stone them to death. And so Offred describes herself. She glances and sees herself in a mirror, and she says, "I'm a sister dipped in blood." And then she says about her outfit, "Everything except the wings around my face is red, the color of blood, which defines us." So.
Yeah, well, certainly it does define them, and I think maybe saying the same thing another way is that it continues to strip away your individuality.
Right.
Everybody's the same.
They literally are not people anymore.
Right.
And they're just dehumanized. And one of the awful ways they use religion in The Handmaid's Tale is there are these women are all in different classes. There are only a few kinds of women you can be in Gilead. You can be a handmaid, and they're dressed in red, a wife, and the wives of the commanders are dressed in blue, a Martha, and the Marthas are the maids and the cooks and the house cleaners. And so, these are all color-coded. And then there are the aunts. And the aunts train the handmaids.
Okay.
And they're some of the worst characters in the book. And they're some of one of the things they do when they train them is they totally misquote the Bible so that they can manipulate them.
Right.
Yeah.
There's, I think we could, a reader could shield themselves from this by saying, well, this isn't real, it's not possible, and so on. But really, I would bet you that every element of that has been manifest in the past in some way that we could relate to.
That's a perfect point, Stephen, actually, because she says in the introduction to The Handmaid's Tale that nothing in this book, she doesn't put anything in this book that hasn't at some point happened in history.
When you were talking about the handmaids killing, the thought that was going through my head was a mob mentality. And, well, I mean, Nazism, I think we saw that you can be talked into or justify. In fact, there's a famous psychological experiment where everybody was in on this except the fella actually flipping the switch, and he thought that he was, it was about telepathy. I'm looking at a picture of and the guy, if he said apple and it was an apple, I mean, it's irrelevant if he was right or wrong, because they would just shock him. They would shock the person who was guessing, except that the person being shocked wasn't shocked at all.
Wasn't really shocked.
They were, what they did was they yelled. And so then the person conducting the experiment said, well, that we've got to turn up the voltage. And the only one that wasn't in on this said he's the one that had to flip the switch and or push the button or something. And to see how could people be manipulated under the guise of authority. Very few people at some point said, what, I'm not doing this. Most people went through with it.
Well, and it's interesting, the psychology of it, because the handmaids have so little power. And people who have so little power just, clutch at any little bit they're given, I think.
On the one hand, I think that's true. And on the other hand, if I remember, I read this quite some time ago, but isn't there something where Offred does something illegal like smoke a cigarette or eat a treat or something that was really off limits, but I think human nature maybe finds a way to resist some way.
Well, what happens for her is her commander, her owner, wants her to be happy somehow, because the former handmaid had killed herself by hanging in the room where Offred lives now in the house. So the commander invites, kind of just commands Offred to come to his kind of secret office at night, and they play Scrabble.
That's right.
They
Yeah.
play Scrabble.
Okay.
And he brings her different little gifts.
Maybe that's it.
So he gives her a woman's magazine. And that's totally against the rules because the handmaids aren't even, none of the women in Gilead are allowed to read.
Mm-hmm.
So he gives her a woman's magazine. He brings her hand lotion another time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting to unpack all of that? Is there something immutable between men and women? I think men can be not so good, but you still, maybe it's a show of affection, appreciation. He's not currying anything from her that he can't have anyway.
Right.
So,
well, I think he's set up a world that he doesn't like either. There's no love in Gilead. There's no real communion.
even with his wife, I would think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's no connection with people anymore, and so he's hungry for that.
Yeah.
So at one point he sneaks Offred to a nightclub that the commanders have
Right.
set up on the side.
Right.
And she's like, well, how are we doing this? It's so against the law. And he said, oh, well, everybody's human. Even
Right.
though he's the one that set this up,
Right.
this world up, he misses a normal
Right.
life. So he breaks the rules that he created.
I had thought of this in anticipation of talking with you, and so this has come to me just today, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I had a writing class where the teacher talked about the refrigerator test. And so when you write something, I mean literature, or it could be a movie, and I think her illustration was a movie. So you go to the movie and you watch the movie, and you enjoy that, and you get all the way home and you get all the way to the refrigerator for a glass of milk, and then you think, wait a minute, why didn't they just whatever it is?
Yeah.
In The Handmaid's Tale, it's been a long time since I've read that, and I just thought today, well, if you just want children, why isn't artificial insemination? But I think the reason is because it's not as horrific.
Right.
You know, there would be no
Right.
there would be no drama.
Right.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's like state-approved rape,
Oh, sure.
which makes it so much more dramatic and awful.
Now, and again, I'm trying to remember here, isn't the handmaid during this act sort of held between the legs of the wife?
Right.
Oh my goodness.
It's awful because they totally misquote a scripture that when Rachel asks Jacob for more children, she said, so that my handmaid may present children on my knees, which basically is talking about put the baby on my lap.
Right.
But they take it literally. So literally the wife is, and the commander kind of sandwich the handmaids during what's called the ceremony. It's
ceremony.
Horrible.
We talked about the book being, is it feminist? Is it anti-religious? Margaret Atwood says no. And then I read sort of an interpretation of that. And that is, there are two ways to approach a work of art. It could be anything, a statue or a book or something. And that is, I think it's called intentionalism. And intentionalism is when the creator declares what it is. So she says, no, it's not that. And so if you look at this through intentionalism, we're done. What that doesn't allow for is the participation of the consumer or the recipient or something to interpret things. And it doesn't allow for a changing atmosphere, a changing time. So when something is created, in the moment it's created, it may be seen as one thing. As we move along and the world changes, gee, maybe we can look at this a different way.
All the world changing since 1985 has only confirmed some of her worst suspicions
Yeah,
in this novel.
right.
And in terms of her intention, people had asked her that question so much that she answered the question that they were asking, but she's not forcing anybody to take her word for it.
Sure.
And so you could read this book somebody could read this book as being anti-religious, but I think it would be a misreading. I think it would be a misreading if they
Sure.
do, whether she ever said that or not.
Right.
And so my book kind of deals with that
Yeah.
complication that, you know, this theocracy is horrible, but it's not really it's not really based on anything godlike.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
you use the word theocracy. I'm not sure that, and I think that you would agree that maybe that's not the right word.
Well, they
If-
call it that.
They call it
They
that.
want it to be
What,
seen
what,
as a
what do you think
theocracy.
that we would say is a more accurate description?
Well, they have fun with this theocracy thing. Let me talk about that for a
Yeah,
second, because
please.
they name everything with Bible words. Like
Okay.
their food stores called Loaves and Fishes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their clothing stores called Lilies of the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And so they co-opt a lot of religious terminology to make it seem like a theocracy.
Right.
But what they actually do under that veneer is anything but
Sure.
Christian or, you know, religious, godlike in any way. So,
Right.
so go back to your other question there. I just got you off the topic.
No, well, I
Okay.
was thinking, what would be a better word or a different word?
Then theocracy?
Yeah. And I'm trying to come up with something really cool. I'm thinking of, you know, a sham or something,
Yeah.
but that's not,
I mean, just going back to what it is, a dystopia.
yeah,
Yeah, which is the opposite of
utopia.
utopia.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a horrible place, really.
it is a horrible place. I heard that the first season, I think, is wrapped up now, the television show. And-
Actually, they've had 3 seasons now.
Oh, have they?
But when I had to finish writing this book, they only had 2 seasons. So
Okay.
my chapter 5 is on the Hulu series.
Okay.
I have a whole chapter on the Hulu series here.
Well, then this is perfect.
Okay.
And I said first season. Maybe what I read was that it has ended for this season, but it's coming back. There's going to be another.
Yes.
And
I think they're going to have a total of maybe 5 seasons.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So any predictions about where we go from here? In other words, if what has just concluded really wrapped up the book, then we have to go on and.
Yeah. Right. So at the end of season 1, the Hulu series made it all the way through the book,
Okay.
basically. And so season 2 and 3 are beyond what Margaret Atwood wrote.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to actually see her in September 25th. She was in Portland.
So very recently.
Yes, and I took some students. And the great thing about that is my students parked in a different spot, 3 of my students, and they were walking past the Keller Auditorium to the back of it just as Margaret Atwood came out.
Oh boy.
And she greeted them and signed their books, and they got to meet her and talk to her. So
Oh boy.
that was great. They
Yeah.
were totally excited about that because she really didn't do a book signing.
Okay.
Pal's had books that were already signed there,
Right.
but she didn't do a book signing that
Yeah.
night. But where was I going with this? Sorry.
Well, I don't know, but I was just thinking
Yeah.
you heard her speak.
Yes, and so so one of the things she explained that night is when the Hulu series came up, nobody knew who owned the rights to The Handmaid's Tale.
Really?
So it ended up being MGM who did a movie of The Handmaid's Tale years ago. I think
Oh, I
in
didn't know that.
1990 or 1989 they did
Okay.
a movie of it. So they owned the rights. So they asked Margaret Atwood for her opinion, but they didn't really have to take it. But
Right.
they mostly have taken it.
Right.
So, but she's not the screenwriter of the Hulu series.
Okay, so when you
So-
say they ask, it was Hulu who asked.
The Hulu
Yeah, okay.
producers and
Right.
screenwriters have that storyline now beyond the book
Okay.
for season 2 and season 3.
Okay.
And Margaret Atwood was funny because, of course, then when all that happened, she decided to write the sequel, The Testaments, that just came out this month. That's why
Okay.
my publisher held my book to coincide with the
Gotcha.
publication of The Testaments. But and so she was funny that night because she explained that one of the things she had to ask the Hulu series, her new book is set 15 years in the future from when this book ended.
Correct. Okay.
And the Hulu series is right after, just like
Oh.
a year or 2
Okay.
beyond the book. So the main thing she asked the Hulu series to do is not kill off certain characters that
right.
she wanted to bring back 15 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend Elizabeth George, the BBC got the rights to her books and characters. And she asked the same thing, that so that I can keep writing.
Right.
Don't kill off
Don't
the
kill 'em off.
protagonist.
Right, exactly.
Where do I go from here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, before we just completely run out of time, could you do a poem for us? I know that's kind of
Sure.
something that.
Sure. I'd be happy to. So, since it's October
Yeah.
and getting to be Halloweenish, I will read a couple of poems I just got published in a poetry journal in Portland. And this first one is about my dog that I had. I had a German Shepherd for years, and every now and then I have these weird experiences.
Okay.
And I had to leave her behind, even though it was a German Shepherd, and you know how close they are to their owner. But we had to leave her behind in Ohio when we moved out to Oregon. And it about broke my heart. And so we had left her behind. It was a couple years later. I was driving through West Salem, and I saw my dog in the sky. That was weird. And I thought it was kind of weird at the time, but it's just like, I don't know. I don't know. I got home, and our neighbor called to say that she had died.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. So this is for Bridget. It's called Visitation. Bridget, my German Shepherd, appeared to me before she transformed from metered rhyme to free verse. Her knowing brown eyes once told me I was pregnant, months before I knew. I had to leave her on a horse farm 2,600 miles behind after a decade together. Years later, driving east from home, I saw her in the sky, Bridget, clear as a crescent moon. She had come to watch over me, to say goodbye one more time before she floated deeper into that unspoiled sky.
Yeah.
So there's that one.
That would almost be hard to get through, to read out loud. Yeah.
I can do it now, but I couldn't have probably at the time.
Right.
Especially when we drove away from leaving her.
Sure.
And if you want me to do another one, I have another one right up here.
Yeah.
It's about my father who died in Ohio, and it's after Lee Young Lee, who's this wonderful poet. And he has a poem called Little Father that starts out, I buried my father in the sky. And so this is, you know, an after poem of that. I buried my father in Ohio snow. Since then, the sun rises to warm his shoulders. At night, stars can tell he's the life of the party, so they try to imitate the Kentucky beauty of his eyes. I buried my father beneath. Since then, he thrums in my blood, in my lungs, in all the gifts I can hold in my arms, in the grip and flourish of my hands. I buried my father in the piano, the one he bought with his life. Now the keys press down to the rhythm of his breath. Every hammer is attached to his heart, all the accidentals black as his wild raven hair.
It makes me think about not longevity, but immortality. Maybe that we keep people alive. Maybe, I don't know, in our thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
One more thing, and we're going to have to go.
Okay.
Reading the Gothic and Margaret Atwood's first 7 novels. I looked that up, and I saw Amazon is selling a copy for $327.90.
Oh dear.
Now I want to know, how do you manage that?
Well, I think that's probably just somebody being silly.
And I found a variety of prices on, but one was, I think, $128
I think
or
that
something.
is about what it goes for, about $100. It's more like a library book.
Okay, okay.
So none of my friends bought that.
Well, when we
But this one is only $12.95.
All
so
right, well,
this is a good deal.
Yeah, it is a good deal.
in
You know,
comparison.
and I'll plug for all books, and this has been my pitch. If you go buy a Hallmark card that's $5 or $6,
Right.
for twice as much you can get a book, and a book is a lot more stuff.
And
I think it's a lot more
agree.
fun.
Thank you.
Go
I
out and buy
agree.
books, folks. Well, that's
Thank
it
you,
for us.
Stephen.
All right. Thank you
All
so
right.
much for coming again.
Sure.
And thanks, everyone, for watching. This is The Writing Life. I'm Stephen W. Long. I would love for you to write to me at stephenwlong.com. Colette, I suspect you have a website?
I do. Well, I mostly have an email.
Okay.
I don't use my website very much.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Would you be
C-
comfortable giving that out?
Sure, I would love to.
Okay.
Tennant at Corban, CORBAN.edu.
Okay, there we go. We're waiting for you guys.
Yeah,
So,
right.
thanks very much. We'll see you next time.
All right.
All right, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you think? We done?
I don't know, you guys wanna do one just with yourself without me doing the
They think we're
markers?
done, if
No,
they got
no.
enough, they got enough.
They got enough? Probably, okay, sounds good.
Let's go lunch.
Oh,
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
yeah, I could use a bite too.